is impoverished and there is nothing in it, and it's largely because he reads books of hadith and books of law and knows nothing about the art, the philosophy, the ethics, and so on and so forth. Okay, so then let me tell you what then we will try to do tomorrow, inshallah. So first is the issue of hadith methodology, because that is the heart of the matter. Because hadith methodology, when Shafi'i says إذا ثبت عندنا الحديث فهو شرعنا فهو مذهبي. The hadith is accepted for, it becomes a self. This is my school of thought. Was these type of statements, whether the historicity is a different thing, but whether these types of statements in fact intended to resolve larger moral questions, or even what they really meant. So Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, for instance, in his muqaddimah to Sharh al-Bukhari, the muqaddimah is called Hadi al-Sari fi Sharh al-Bukhari, and in his Hadi al-Sari says فالحديث صحيح عندنا ظنا والحديث الفاسد فاسد عندنا ظنا. So what he's saying is a hadith that we declare to be sahih. We declare to be sahih because as a matter of tarjih, as a matter of probability of belief, we reached a probability of belief that it is sahih. But in Hadi al-Sari, Ibn Hajar continues to say that this hadith sahih, this what we declare a sahih hadith, in fact might be a total kadhib ala Rasulillah. We've declared it sahih according to the tarjihan, but in haqiqah it could be a complete lie, right? And he says, and the opposite is true, that there are hadiths that we've declared to be inauthentic, and in fact it could be completely authentic. And he actually in Hadi al-Sari he talks a great deal about why this is so, that in hermeneutics and in ilm al-rijal, when we engage in this process of ta'dil and tarjih, and we look at what has been reported about men, as Ibn Hajar points out, and this is Ibn Hajar, is just one, but it's just so many, that in fact in every report we have about every individual involved, even in the golden chain, Bukhari's golden chain, the transmit, the thulathiyya, as they say, the thulathiyya al-Bukhari, the three transmitters that is supposed to be the height of isnad and al-Bukhari, that every individual within this transmission, when you look at the reports about their authenticity, you always find, even if there are 99% of those who said that this person was truthful, you always find a dissenting view. Now, and quite often, more often than not, there is no way, and even when we say that this dissenting view is wrong, نقول بهذا ظنا, we say that tarjihan, it's from the evidence that we've researched, this is what we reach. So when we have in a lot of the sahih individuals who heard the hadith purportedly when they were 10 years old, and then you have individuals like Bukhari, who comes from Bukhara, and he's not a native Arab speaker, but he's not from Medina, and he's not, but he travels to various individuals. And these individuals tell Bukhari that we've heard from someone who heard, from someone who heard, from someone who heard. Remember, Bukhari is in the 3rd century, and most of the although earlier there are earlier hadith collections, but I'm using Bukhari just simply as an example. He is relying on a chain of transmission and various in the books of Rijal, these books that tell you about the various transmitters. We also have a very fascinating dynamic without exception in all of them. And that is the process of a tarjih al-aqaidi or tarjih al-mazhabi, that some individuals, we look at them and we find that there are accusations, I mean, nearly for many of these accusations that this individual was a Mu'tazili. In fact, Bukhari himself was accused of being a Mu'tazili at one point, which probably not, I think it was untrue for a variety of reasons. Among them is that he himself purportedly refused to accept the reports of anyone who was a known Mu'tazili. I mean, even people who had fairly good chains of transmission, Bukhari said, you're among the people who've declared card-carrying Mu'tazila. I am not going to take a hadith from you. There are even the controversies that we have about the mihna and those who acceded to the mihna and those who did not accede to the mihna. I'll just tell you, just so you that you get it. If you haven't worked with Kutub al-Tarjih, Kutub al-Rijal, I'll give you an example of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, or a story said about Ahmad ibn Hanbal. That Ahmad ibn Hanbal purportedly travels, I don't know, months to a very famous narrator of tradition, right? And his very famous narrator of tradition, he's told he's a man of great memory. He's memorized so many hadiths and so many isnads and so on. And then the man, Ahmad ibn Hanbal finds a man, and the man is trying to get his herd animal. I don't remember if it was a donkey or a dog or something. Have you guys heard the story before?
I thought it was Bukhari. With
Maybe
the horse?
It was what I mean. In a lot of these stories, you find the same story narrated about 10 different guys. So I mean that could be a PhD dissertation in itself. It's like these anecdotal, prototypical stories that are often attributed in with slight variations. So the animal was a donkey one time, and a dog one time, and a horse one time. Mm-hmm. But basically, this muhaddis is trying to get the animal to follow them, so they offer them a bag, right? And the bag has no food in it. And then he says, he looks at it and says, oh, this doesn't have any food. Why are you tempting the animal with a bag without food? And he says, well, because I don't have the food, but I want the animal to follow me. And then he says, well, you're lying to your animal. I will not accept your hadith. Right? And these anecdotal reports about how tenacious they are about truth, but غربلة علم الرجال, that analysis of علم الرجال, when you, for instance, find so many of the reports about this muhaddis or that muhaddis who he recited the full Quran every day and prayed 1,000 rak'ahs and said, I don't know, and you sit and you write it out in mathematical equations, right? I mean, if you have a minimum of mathematical talent, try this out. So you calculate, even if you're a speed prayer, how much it takes to pray a speed rak'ah, right? And then you calculate 10,000 according to whatever the report is, and how much. And even if you're a speed reader of the Quran, you zap through the Quran as fast as you can. and then you calculate how much it would take to finish it a day. And then you do your calculation, you find that these reports often are impossible, mathematically, empirically, not possible. If this person slept at all, ate at all, went to the bathroom at all, but then you're also told that they traveled and they sat in this munadara and sat in this munadara and sat. In other words, they've done other things, and you're completely. Now, within its historical context, these exaggerations are entirely reasonable. Within their historical context, these exaggerations are, George Tolomy's is completely wrong. They don't demonstrate irrationality, and the Orientalists are completely wrong, like Lawrence Rosen. They don't demonstrate that Muslims have no sense of space and time. Within their historical context, you read medieval history. I don't care in what field, you find that these are the prototypes of transmitting meaning and value. And so you want to say that this poet was a true lover. You say this poet used to stay on his knees under the balcony of his beloved without eating, drinking, moving, and so on, every day for 22 hours a day for 6 months. Now, European tradition especially is full of things like that. Or this poet used to recite the Iliad daily, or this poet or this theologian would read through the New Testament every day before he would have breakfast. You find many of these traditions. Now, of course, those who write are doing European history because they haven't had a colonial experience, understand these reports in their historical context, so they immediately analyze them within their historical meaning and functionality. But in the Islamic context, you've had those who use them to prove that Muslims are mentally challenged, and then Muslims who reacted to this by holding onto these reports as empirically the truth. But in ilm al-tarjih, what you find is that the books on Rijal are remarkably and far more sophisticated than modern scholars of hadith make them appear to be. I had the opportunity to study with Mustafa al-Azam. He was one of the great hadith scholars and Ahl hadith people. He spent all his life in Saudi Arabia. He's from India, but he speaks Arabic fluently. I mean, he reads and writes and speaks Arabic fluently. And I actually took a 2-semester course with him. It was a very interesting experience because it was in Princeton. And it was remarkable how you would assign me to read the entries on certain rijal. I would read a set of various conflicting reports about the individual, and I would end up with a very indeterminate view of the credibility of the individual. Quite often I would say, well, you have 6 people that said this was a good person, good transmitter, and you have 2 people that impeach his credibility. It's indeterminate for me. Mustafa al-Azam, and this is not to put him down, but to just tell you the difference in hermeneutic approach. followed, approached the issue like a bureaucrat trying to decide whether this paper that is presented to him must be either given the governmental stamp of approval or denied the governmental stamp of approval. So in every رجل من رجال الحديث, he actually threw one student, Denise Sophie, was a PhD student. He threw her out of class because she would refuse to reach a conclusion about men. Well, I mean, he threw her out of class because she was a woman. With me, he just said, I'm an idiot, but didn't throw me out of class. He did give me an A, which was really interesting, because he kept insisting that I'm just an idiot throughout, but maybe because I studied with Muhammad Ghazali, so he said, you always say your teacher was a very pious and good man, but just not knowledgeable in Ilm al-Rijal, and what not knowledgeable meant is that he couldn't reach the right judgment. And the right judgment, if you are told that this man prayed 1,000 rak'ahs a day, how could you then reach the conclusion that this is not a credible transmitter? How is that not just positive and conclusive for you? And my response was often, well, because I know that basically the person was trying to say that this was a pious fellow. But, it's really, all the, now, so this ilm al-rijal and the transmission of hadith is a critical part of what we have to engage, because it, leave alone whether a hadith al-ahad, singularly transmitted hadith, can be used as a base of law, or whether it can be used as a matter of aqidah, or whether it can contradict the Quran. I mean, all these questions. But there is a fundamental issue of whether we can accept it as part of the historiography of the Prophet, or the companions of the Prophet, or the family of the Prophet. And now once you enter into the picture, the historiography of Ilm al-Rijal between Sunni sources and Shia sources, the transmitters of Ahl al-Bayt versus the transmitters who took political positions or were not part of Ahl al-Bayt, or took political positions that were not completely supportive of Ahl al-Bayt, you find a very fascinating dynamic, because then you find a very critical test of credibility being applied, being dispositive in a certain approach, and being not dispositive at all in another approach. The other critical part, which is still part of historiography but it's not necessarily related to hadith, is that we know that Allah tells us that calls upon us to reflect repeatedly upon the historical legacy of the past nations. Now, Allah, I mean, because Allah doesn't say وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ في فتنة علي ومعاوية, then you have everyone say, well, no, the tafakkur only applies to qawm Saba and qawm this and qawm that, but not anything beyond that. That is a type of thick, dense, dunce thinking that plagues the Muslim predicament. Because tafakkur fi ma sabaq cannot be to a point and then it stops, because then the rest of what unfolds somehow is irrelevant. When we reflect upon the legacy of past generations, we must reflect upon the legacy of past generations. So this, and then the theological order of the main function of the Islamic message must be rethought the 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 بناء النفس, the Islamic message that came to hold an individual accountable, not because it simply wants to hold an individual accountable, but because it wants to construct an individual in a certain psychological and moral sense, so that then holding that individual accountable would be a sensible and rational act. Because if you just, if your point is to hold people accountable without building them morally first, then that would be an entirely mechanical, uninteresting thing. I think at least we can say it's lacking aesthetics and lacking virtue. So tomorrow, inshallah, and I sense my the antsy. I always pick up on auras and meet, and I could sense the antsiness and the nervousness from this corner of the room, just like woos and waves of interruptions saying, okay, enough. Doctor said this, doctor, that doctor, this medicine, that medicine. Remember, your this happened yesterday and this happened. It was just like it's so deafening and powerful that it's even impossible to construct sentences. It's subhanAllah, it's amazing. So, okay, I got the point. So, tomorrow, inshallah, this was what we will carry with, and I'm very especially on the point of historiography, the point of the evaluation of Islamic history, is what I'm very interested in engaging you about. At least those of you who's willing to share your views, because I'm not going to put anyone on the spot. I mean, we have a guy here who wrote a dissertation on sort of exactly the point of. But anyway, I'm not going to embarrass him and put him on the spot. He's just from Princeton and his name is Nabil, that's all. Other than that, I'm not going to put him on the spot. But I'm interested in having a conversation about this, because that is a critical part of thinking about that point of this Muslim and the predicament that we're left with. Okay, ونسأل الله غفران والتوفيق, and inshallah, hopefully I'll see all of you, if not most of you, or even some of you tomorrow. I hope everyone shows up. Barakallah feek. All right, I will be a good boy and go lie down. Take a medicine and lie down. I lost my eyeglass.
I have them.